Breaking the chains of anxiety. How to build an unshakable mindset and live free from fear. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself, why does anxiety seem to have so much power over my life? If the answer is yes, you're not alone. In a world filled with pressures, doubts, and external expectations, it's natural to feel that the chains of anxiety are holding us back, making our journey more difficult. But what would happen if you could break those chains and transform anxiety into a motivating force for growth and evolution? In this video, we'll explore how to build an unshakable mindset, one that isn't dominated by fear or anxiety. You'll learn practices rooted in Stoic philosophy that can be applied immediately to transform your life, strengthen your mind, and live free from fear. Along this journey, deep self-awareness, self-discipline, and emotional control will become essential allies in overcoming anxiety and achieving a balanced, serene life. Comment below. What are the biggest sources of anxiety you face in your daily life? How have you been dealing with them? And if you're ready to break the chains of anxiety, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to not miss more transformative videos like this.
Understanding anxiety. What does it really mean for your life? Anxiety is one of the most common experiences in modern life, but we often don't stop to understand what it truly means. It's not just a feeling of fear or worry, but a physical and emotional manifestation of our body's response to perceived uncertainty or threat.
When fear of the future or the pressure of the present affects us, anxiety emerges as a natural response. But it can also be paralyzing, preventing us from acting with clarity and focus. However, understanding its origin and how it manifests in our body and mind is the first step to controlling and overcoming it. At its core, anxiety is tied to our need for control. We want to predict the future, plan every step, and ensure things go as expected. But life, as we know, is unpredictable, and this constant uncertainty can create a sense of vulnerability. The pressure to meet expectations, whether at work, in relationships, or even our own expectations, is one of the biggest triggers of anxiety. When we feel unable to control circumstances, the mind fills with worries about what could go wrong, leading to constant stress and a loss of inner peace. However, understanding that anxiety is a natural response and that we don't need to be slaves to it opens a path to transformation. By identifying anxiety's triggers, we can learn to respond consciously rather than react impulsively. Stoic philosophy teaches us to accept what we cannot control and act with wisdom in what is within our reach. This allows us to cultivate a strong mindset, where anxiety ceases to be an enemy and becomes an opportunity for self-awareness and personal growth. Stoic philosophy and its role in overcoming anxiety. Stoic philosophy, with its deep roots in ancient wisdom, offers a robust path to overcoming anxiety and facing life's challenges with serenity and self-control. Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius teach us that while we cannot control external events, we can control our emotional reactions to them. Anxiety often stems from our resistance to what is uncertain or beyond our reach. By internalizing Stoic wisdom, we can learn to accept with calm what we cannot change and act with clarity on what we can influence. Stoicism doesn't deny the existence of fear or anxiety, but provides a practical approach to avoid being consumed by them. The key to Stoicism is perception. When overtaken by anxiety, our mind fills with catastrophic thoughts about what might happen, leaving us feeling powerless. However, by applying the concept that we cannot control events but can choose how to react to them, we begin to change our relationship with anxiety. Anxious thoughts are often not based on real facts, but on projections of fear and doubt. Stoic philosophy teaches us to question these projections and make decisions based on reason, not fear. By adopting this mindset, we dissolve anxiety, allowing it to lose its power over us. Furthermore, Stoic teachings emphasize the practice of self-discipline and emotional control. By focusing on what we can control, our thoughts, actions, and emotional responses, we become more resilient in the face of anxiety. Stoicism teaches us that inner peace is not the absence of difficulties, but the ability to remain calm and centered, even when the world around us is in chaos. By applying this philosophy, we can transform anxiety into an opportunity to strengthen the mind, creating a space of serenity where worries become fleeting observations rather than controlling forces. The power of self-awareness. How to identify anxiety. Triggers. Deep self-awareness is one of the most powerful keys to overcoming anxiety. When we understand how our mind and emotions work, we can identify the triggers that spark anxious thoughts. Anxiety often doesn't arise without reason. It's frequently a reflection of unresolved worries, unrealistic expectations, or fear of the future. By dedicating time to reflect on our emotions, we begin to notice the patterns that fuel anxiety. Perhaps it's excessive self-demand at work or a fear of failing to meet others' expectations. Knowing the source of anxiety is the first step to breaking free from it. Self-awareness allows us to recognize when we're imagining negative scenarios that don't align with reality. Often, we worry about future situations over which we have no control. The anxious mind tends to create mental stories about what might happen, and these stories are usually more catastrophic than the actual situation. When we identify these thought patterns, we can begin to challenge them. The practice of mental self-control, as taught by Stoic philosophy, involves questioning automatic thoughts and replacing them with a more balanced perspective. Self-awareness helps us separate facts from perceptions, allowing us to act with more clarity and less fear. Moreover, self-awareness gives us the freedom to act in accordance with our deepest values, rather than being guided by fear or anxiety. By recognizing our inner strengths and limitations, we become better equipped to face life's challenges without being dominated by anxiety. Developing unshakable self-esteem comes from accepting who we are, including our flaws and imperfections, and the ability to adapt to situations without losing ourselves in them. Deep self-awareness creates a solid foundation for transforming anxiety into motivation, as we can now see challenges as opportunities for growth and evolution rather than something to fear. Building an unshakable mindset. How to strengthen your mind to overcome anxiety. Strengthening the mind is one of the most powerful steps to overcoming anxiety and facing life's challenges with confidence and clarity. An unshakable mindset doesn't mean the absence of fear or anxiety, but the ability to act with serenity and emotional control despite these emotions. The key to building this mindset is cultivating self-control and discipline, two qualities that help us stay focused on what's important without being consumed by worries. Anxiety is often fueled by a lack of control, and when we learn to control our mind, anxiety loses its power over us. To develop a strong mindset, it's essential to practice deep self-awareness and cultivate unshakable self-esteem. This involves recognizing and accepting our thoughts and feelings without letting them dominate us. When we practice self-discipline and commit to acting according to our values, we make decisions that strengthen us emotionally. A strong mindset is built not by avoiding anxiety, but by facing it head-on, using it as an opportunity for growth and evolution. Stoicism teaches us that we cannot control external events, but we can always control how we react to them. This mindset of self-control and serenity is the foundation for a life without fear. Additionally, mental strength comes from consistent practice. Just as we develop physical strength through regular exercise, our mind also needs training. Activities like meditation, breathing exercises, and mindfulness help train the mind for calm, keeping it centered even in high-pressure situations. By adopting these practices regularly, we develop a resilient mindset capable of facing any adversity without being consumed by anxiety. The result is an unshakable mindset that allows us to act with clarity and confidence even when fear and uncertainty try to steer us off course. Stoic discipline. How to create habits that combat anxiety. Daily discipline is one of the cornerstones of Stoicism and a powerful ally in combating anxiety. In daily life, anxiety tends to arise when we feel out of control, whether due to fear of the future, overwhelming tasks, or external expectations. However, by adopting Stoic discipline, we gain mastery over the mind and act with intention, rather than reacting impulsively to situations. Discipline isn't about rigidity or excessive restriction, but about acting with purpose, organizing chaos, and maintaining serenity, regardless of what's happening around us. The daily practice of Stoic discipline involves creating habits that nurture the mind and body. strengthening our ability to overcome anxiety with consistent actions. This can include simple habits like organizing daily tasks, maintaining a self-care routine, and taking pauses for reflection. Stoicism teaches us to focus on what's within our control and accept with serenity what we cannot change. When we adopt this approach, we begin to free the mind from excessive worries and constant anxiety, as discipline gives us control over our actions and thoughts. By practicing mental discipline, anxiety loses its power over us. This doesn't mean challenges and difficulties will disappear, but rather that we'll have the clarity and strength needed to face them with calm and discernment. Emotional self-control is a skill refined through daily practice. Repeating healthy habits such as meditating in the morning, planning the day strategically, and practicing gratitude strengthens our strong mindset and prepares us to handle work and life challenges with serenity. With discipline, we can transform anxiety into a tool for growth, as it allows us to act more intentionally and with clear purpose. The art of accepting the uncontrollable. How Stoic acceptance can free you from anxiety. Anxiety often arises from resisting what we cannot control. Fear of the unknown, the desire to predict the future, and the dread of failure are some of the emotions that consume us when we try to control what's beyond our reach. Accepting the uncontrollable is, therefore, one of the most powerful Stoic practices for freeing oneself from anxiety. Marcus Aurelius reminds us in his Meditations that we shouldn't fight against circumstances, but learn to act with wisdom and tranquility in their presence. Accepting what we cannot change is not a sign of weakness, but of inner strength and wisdom. This acceptance grants us the freedom to live with peace and release the mind from unnecessary worries. Accepting the uncontrollable doesn't mean resigning or ceasing to act in situations that require effort, but rather letting go of the need to control every detail. Acceptance is a conscious choice to not let fear of the future dominate us, to not allow anxiety about what we cannot change to take over our mind. When we start accepting life's uncertainties, we create a strong mindset that frees us from the burden of anxiety. We cannot control unforeseen events or others' actions, but we can choose how we respond to them, with wisdom and serenity. By integrating this Stoic practice into our lives, we begin to realize that many of our worries and fears are unnecessary, as many situations are simply beyond our control. Freeing ourselves from this mental burden allows us to act with clarity, without being swept away by the waves of anxiety. Acceptance is, in fact, a practice of emotional self-control, where instead of fighting against what we cannot change, we choose to focus on what we can control, our actions, thoughts, and attitude toward challenges. In doing so, we begin to live with more freedom, less anxiety, and greater connection to our inner peace. The importance of breathing and inner silence for controlling anxiety. When anxiety arises, it pulls us into a cycle of rapid, shallow breathing, which further heightens the sense of loss of control and fear. The simple act of breathing deeply can interrupt this cycle, providing a moment of calm and control. The practice of conscious breathing is one of the most effective ways to calm the mind and reduce anxiety instantly. By inhaling deeply and exhaling slowly, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for the sensation of relaxation and calm, allowing us to regain mental clarity and emotional control. Moreover, inner silence is a powerful tool that complements conscious breathing. We live in a noisy world where external demands constantly bombard us, and our mind becomes overwhelmed with the internal noise of worries and fears. Creating moments of inner silence, whether through meditation or simply focusing on breathing, allows us to disconnect from this turbulence and access a space of tranquility within us. This mental silence gives us the ability to see situations more clearly and act with greater wisdom, without being consumed by anxiety or external pressures. The consistent practice of conscious breathing and inner silence strengthens mental discipline and emotional resilience, two qualities essential for overcoming anxiety and living with greater balance. When we connect with our breathing and inner silence, we learn to distance ourselves from impulsive reactions and act more centered and calmly, even in moments of high pressure. This practice also teaches us serenity in the face of chaos, allowing us to face adversities with a strong mindset and emotional self-control. Transforming anxiety into motivation. How to use fear for personal growth. Anxiety, as uncomfortable as it may be, holds latent power that, when understood and well-directed, can become a motivating force. Fear is often seen as an enemy to be fought. But what would happen if, instead of fearing it, we began to use it as fuel for our actions and decisions? Anxiety can be an emotional response to the unknown or to challenges that seem insurmountable, but it can also be the impetus needed for action. When we learn to transform fear into motivation, we can use anxiety to propel us toward achieving our goals. One of the first steps to transforming anxiety into motivation is accepting fear as a natural part of the growth process. Fear isn't an obstacle, but a sign that we're about to step out of our comfort zone. When we confront situations that cause anxiety, instead of avoiding or fleeing from them, we can face them head-on, knowing they are opportunities for personal growth. Stoic philosophy teaches us not to fear what's beyond our control, but to focus on what we can do to act with virtue and wisdom in the face of these challenges. By acting with courage in the face of anxiety, we begin to realize it loses its power over us. Transforming anxiety into motivation is also a process of deep self-awareness. When we look at our sources of fear and anxiety, we can identify values and goals that truly matter to us. Anxiety then becomes a reminder that we're on the right path, striving for more in our lives. Each time we face a fear, we become stronger, more resilient, and more capable of handling what life presents. True motivation doesn't come from the absence of fear, but from the power to act despite it. This process, guided by self-discipline and Stoic mindset, allows us to grow with confidence and transform anxiety into a powerful ally in our personal development. Breaking the chains of anxiety. How to free your mind from constant worries. Constant worries are one of the main causes of anxiety. We're continually imagining future scenarios, concerned about what may or may not happen, which prevents us from fully living in the present. These mental chains trap us in a cycle of fears and doubts, creating a sense of emotional overload. However, just as the chains of anxiety can imprison us, we can also break them by understanding their origin and applying practices that help free our mind. The first step is becoming aware that excessive worries are often based on automatic thoughts, not concrete facts. Freeing ourselves from constant worries begins with creating space for inner silence. When we allow ourselves to disconnect from mental noise, we start to see things more clearly and balanced. Often we become so immersed in worries that we lose the ability to focus on the present. Stoic philosophy teaches us not to cling to what we cannot control, and by applying this idea, we begin to break the chains of anxiety. By accepting life's uncertainties and focusing on what truly matters, we create a space of inner peace where worries no longer dominate our mind. It's in this silence that we find the freedom to act with clarity, unguided by fear or uncertainty. Additionally, the practice of mindfulness and emotional self-control are essential for keeping our mind free from incessant worries. Observing our thoughts without identifying with them allows us to free the mind from the chains of fear. Each time we step away from worries, we create more space for serenity and deep self-awareness. This mental liberation isn't an immediate process, but a continuous practice that, when done with discipline, leads to controlled anxiety and a fuller, more conscious life. By breaking the chains of anxiety, our inner strength grows, allowing us to live with more confidence, balance, and emotional freedom. The practice of gratitude. How daily gratitude helps overcome fear and anxiety. Gratitude is one of the most powerful and transformative practices when it comes to overcoming anxiety. Often, our mind gets stuck in a cycle of worries and fears, where we focus solely on difficulties and doubts about the future. But by cultivating daily gratitude, we begin to shift our perspective and see life in a more balanced way. Gratitude invites us to focus on the positive things, the small victories, and the blessings we often overlook, even amidst adversity. When we practice gratitude, we transform our mindset, replacing negative thoughts with ones that strengthen us. Starting the day with a moment of gratitude reprograms our mind to focus on what's good, what's within our control, and what we can value, rather than being dominated by anxiety and fear. The consistent practice of gratitude creates a positive space within us, where anxiety and fear cannot take hold as strongly. Stoic philosophy reminds us that what we have in our hands is enough to be grateful for. Even in the face of challenges, there's always something to value. And by focusing on that, our mind calms and our anxiety diminishes. Moreover, gratitude can be seen as a practice of self-respect and acceptance. When we're grateful for what we have, who we are, and the opportunities life offers us, we begin to release toxic comparisons with others and the internal criticism that holds us back. Gratitude centers us in the present, helps strengthen our self-esteem, and connects us with our true value, which is essential for overcoming anxiety. This daily practice transforms us, allowing us to live with a strong mindset and a more balanced life, where inner peace and self-confidence become an increasingly integral part of our daily reality. The challenge of silence: how to find inner peace and overcome anxiety. Inner silence is one of the most profound and powerful practices for overcoming anxiety and cultivating mental peace. We live in a world full of noise, constant information, and external pressures that distract us from our true essence. Often, this lack of silence creates a sense of mental overload and anxiety as we feel disconnected from our inner peace. However, the challenge of silence is precisely about finding calm amidst the chaos, and this silence isn't just the absence of sound, but the mental quietude that allows us to hear our own inner voice, reflect, and act with clarity. The practice of inner silence involves disconnecting from external stimuli and giving our mind space to breathe and reorganize. When anxiety tries to consume us, mental silence becomes the key to regaining emotional control and finding answers from within. Practices like meditation, conscious breathing, and even pauses during the day help us cultivate this space of peace. By dedicating moments to feel the silence within us, we can free the mind from worries and focus on what truly matters: our emotional health and well-being. Furthermore, inner silence also strengthens our self-awareness and self-confidence. When we learn to connect with our essence, free from the noise of the external world, we begin to act with more purpose and make decisions more aligned with our true selves. Stoic philosophy teaches us not to be dominated by external circumstances, and inner silence is a way to remind ourselves of this. Facing anxiety with serenity begins with the ability to quiet the mind, allowing inner peace to guide us rather than fear and unnecessary worries. When we practice silence, we free our mind and become stronger in the face of life's challenges. How to reprogram your mind to live free from fear. The mind, like the body, can be trained and reprogrammed to overcome fear and anxiety. Often, anxiety arises due to automatic mental patterns where we focus on the worst possible scenario and let ourselves be consumed by uncertainty. However, by reprogramming our mind, we can replace these anxious thoughts with positive thoughts and more balanced coping strategies. The practice of mental self-discipline is essential for changing how we react to situations of fear and anxiety, transforming what once limited us into a tool for personal growth. The key to reprogramming the mind is becoming aware of negative thoughts and questioning their validity. These thoughts fuel fear of the unknown and prolong anxiety. When we realize we're not slaves to our thoughts, we begin to gain control over our mind and can decide how to react to each situation. Stoic philosophy teaches us that we cannot control external events, but we have full control over our response to them. Reprogramming our mind involves training our thoughts to act with wisdom and courage, rather than being paralyzed by fear. Additionally, the practice of positive affirmations and visualizations can be highly effective for reprogramming the mind. When we visualize ourselves facing fear with confidence and calm, we create new neural connections that help us handle challenging situations with more clarity. By replacing thoughts of scarcity and fear with thoughts of abundance and courage, we begin to transform our perception of the world and live with a strong, resilient mindset. Reprogramming the mind isn't a quick process, but with consistent practice, we can live free from fear, make more assertive decisions, and enjoy a more balanced and serene life. Overcoming anxiety for the long term. How to create a life free from fear. Living free from anxiety doesn't mean a life without challenges or difficulties, but a life where anxiety doesn't have the power to dominate our choices, emotions, or behaviors. Long-term anxiety overcoming begins with a commitment to changing our relationship with fear and situations that would typically cause stress. This involves accepting fear as part of the process, but not letting it define our life experience. Over time, it's possible to create a balanced and serene life, where fear no longer controls our actions, but becomes motivation to act with courage. The consistent practice of techniques like meditation, conscious breathing, and deep self-awareness allows us to strengthen our mind against negative emotions. With these practices, we can reprogram our mind to react calmly and rationally to situations that once caused anxiety. By applying the Stoic philosophy of focusing on what we can control and accepting what we cannot, we create a solid foundation for overcoming the crises that arise in our journey. Emotional control is a skill that strengthens with practice, and the more we discipline ourselves, the easier it becomes to live without the weight of anxiety. Moreover, true freedom from fear comes from living in accordance with our deepest values and a strong mindset. By focusing on what truly matters, what brings us peace, and taking actions that align our choices with our life's purpose, we create a life of meaning and clarity. Overcoming anxiety for the long term isn't about eliminating fear entirely, but about facing it with serenity, knowing we have the inner strength to overcome any challenge. True freedom comes from living with confidence, acting despite fear, and taking control of our mind to create the life we desire. Now that you have the tools to break the chains of anxiety, it's time to put this knowledge into practice. Remember, anxiety doesn't need to dominate your life. By cultivating an unshakable mindset, acting with courage, and applying Stoic teachings, you can transform anxiety into motivation, use fear to your advantage, and move toward your goals with more clarity and confidence. True transformation begins from within, with the strength of the mind and self-discipline. Ask yourself now, what will you do today to break the chains of anxiety and live with more emotional freedom? What actions can you take now to start building a stronger mindset, less dominated by fear? If this content was helpful to you, share in the comments how you've been applying these principles in your life, or share your own strategies for dealing with anxiety. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell to keep learning more about transforming your mind and life. True change begins now with you. Free yourself from anxiety and start living with more purpose and balance.